So as I explained in part 1 of the screencast, our web server is running Apache and 4 Tomcat servers at 192.168.0.150. So I'm going to hit that request right now, hit that server. And a very simple web app that I'm running shows me which Tomcat server the request has been sent to, as well as a little piece of JavaScript code showing me the current time, just to show that this is happening in real time. You can see this matches my clock up here. So I'm just going to hit refresh a few times just so I can see some requests coming in. You can see that as I hit the Apache server over and over again, that my requests are going to the 4 different servers and the load is being balanced appropriately. So at this time I'm going to show you the balancer page that we set up, the convenience URL in part 1 of the screencast, and I'm just going to hit /balancer. Again, at this point I should mention that you would normally want to secure this this context, but for the purpose of this demonstration I did not do that. So here you can see we're looking at the load balancer manager for this IP address, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm running Apache on an Ubuntu server, and you can see that we are using the by requests load balancing algorithm. Here's the cluster that I set up in part 1 of the screencast, and here are the 4 Tomcat servers listening on AJP, using the AJP protocol, listening on port 5001 through 5004 respectively, and using JVM route JVM1 through 4. All this was set up in part 1 of the screencast. You can see that the by request method just balances the number of requests. It doesn't necessarily care about how large the requests are. So this is a very good method for simple counting of requests, and you can see each server has handled 33 requests at this point. So now I'm going to utilize one of my convenience URLs that I set up earlier, which is /manager1, and this is attempting to redirect me to port 8080 on this server, which is the first Tomcat server, and you see I'm being prompted by the Tomcat Manager application for some credentials. So I will provide those, and you can see that I have a Spring Dictionary service which was provided by the BTI Web Services team. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Apache and invoke the Spring Dictionary service. Now as a user at this point I don't have any idea which of the 4 Tomcat servers are handling this request, and I don't really need to know. But I'm just going to hit this test button, which will do a request for this /dictionary resource, and I got a status of 200 OK, and here's the response that I got. So from a user's perspective, this web service is up and running and everything looks great. Now I'm going to look at the balancer page again, and you can see that now I was at 33 requests and now I'm at 38 requests, and it's been distributed among all 4 servers. So now what I'm going to do is pick this server 1 here, and I clicked on it, and I'm going to edit the worker settings, and I'm just going to hit disabled and submit. You see the status changed from OK to DIS, so now this server is disabled or removed from the cluster, which I illustrated in part 1, and this server will no longer receive any requests. So at this point, although the server is not receiving any new requests, it may have some outstanding requests. So I'm going to go to the manager page for Tomcat Server 1. I'm going to look under the server status and then the complete server status, and I want to just make sure that if there are any threads remaining under the this JK 5001, this is the AJP connector that we set up in part 1. If there are any threads here, which there are, I want to make sure that they're not currently processing anything, and you can see that there are no outstanding requests. Unlike the HTTP connector, which has this request that was processed in 3 milliseconds, which is me hitting the HTTP connector here for this manager page that you're seeing. So there are no requests pending, and the server's not getting any new requests. So now I can effectively do whatever I want to this server without worrying about it causing an outage or any impact to our users. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to undeploy this Spring Dictionary service, and you see that it's gone. It's no longer listed here. And then I'm going to deploy a new version of that same application. So I'm going to go load version 2 and deploy. And it's very important that before I add this server back into the cluster that I invoke this application at least once, because I want to give the application a chance to initialize all of its objects and do any kind of setup that it needs to do, and allow me as the admin to take the hit for that rather than one of our end users. So you can see this looks very similar to the previous version, except this text up here is in red and it's now listed as version 2.0. So I'm going to go ahead and hit test and just make sure my application works. Everything looks great. And now I'm going to go back to the balancer page. And at this time, you can do this in several different ways, but essentially you want to make sure that you only have one server that is processing the old version of the application. So I'm going to disable servers 2 and 3. And now server 4 is the only server that's handling requests. So if I invoke the Spring Dictionary service again, I can be guaranteed that server 4 is handling this request because it's the only one that's still up and running in the cluster. So again, I go back to the balancer page, and at this time, to give my users the updated software, I would enable server 1 and immediately disable server 4. So now server 1 is the only server handling requests, the other 3 are disabled, and if I come back in and hit the Spring Dictionary service again, and my browser has cached this page, so I will shift refresh. There you see that I'm getting the new version of the web application. I can hit the test button, everything works as I expect. I can now go back into the balancer and verify that server 1 is receiving that request and the other 3 servers are not receiving any requests, and I could go into the other servers in turn and update them, and then when I'm done, just come back in and hit enabled, and they're back online, and I'm done. And then I've just done a live hot deployment of software, or deploy patching, or any kind of configuration change that would normally require an outage. You can perform as long as you ensure that you always have at least one server up and running to handle the requests. I'd like to thank the web services team for providing the Spring Dictionary service web app, and their URL again is at bti360.com/restful.